You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
For an epic journey, the Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host, Aaron Judkins, a.k.a. Maverick.
And welcome to Epic Voyages Radio. This is Maverick, and I'm back for a special Christmas edition here on Epic Voyages Radio with our special guest, Dr. Ken Johnson, on the pre-flood origins of astrology. What is modern astrology, and why is so many people fascinated by it? Where did it come from, and why is the ancient pre-flood world very knowledgeable about that? How did they learn about this? Does it have anything to do with our future and the horoscope that really kind of came out of that? These things we're going to be looking at here tonight on our special edition here on Epic Voyages Radio with Dr. Johnson. And this is going to be a fascinating show. So call your friends, call your family, tell them, listen to Epic Voyages Radio right here now, because we're going to have a fantastic night here. Join us in the chat room, as always, if you want to, over at InceptionRadioNetwork.com for live chat. Type in your questions later on. We'll give out the phone number. And if you're listening on the Dark Matter Radio Network, then call your friends and family, tell them to tune in to the Dark Matter Radio Network, and we're going to be talking with Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, welcome again to Epic Voyages Radio.
Oh, thank you for having me back.
Well, I tell you that this has been a really fascinating topic, because the name of tonight's program is the Star of Bethlehem. I told you this was going to be a Christmas special. By the way, I'm live tonight from the Valley of the Giants in the Texas Hill Country, and it's always a pleasure to come back and be on Epic Voyages Radio. I want to wrap up this year real quick by giving some announcements before we jump on. One is that we had the film screening for Finding Noah, and it's not the premiere, it's the screening for the cast and crew. And we had it in Dallas just a few nights ago. I have to say, seeing yourself on the big screen is kind of weird. I've never in my life thought I would be involved in anything like that, but it details our expedition up Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. in the Search for the Ark. That's going to be coming to a theater near you next year. We do not have a release date yet, but as soon as we do, I will let you know. We're probably 6 to 9 months out before it goes to the public theater. Again, this is a theatrical release of the documentary, and I'm really honored to be a part of that, just to see those guys again from the mountain. You know, it's been over a year, and we were all together again and had dinner and saw the movie. The bloopers, which you're not going to get to see, but some of the bloopers were hilarious. And it's just a really good time to see those guys and to be a part of this. So findingnoah.com, that's the website you need to go to, findingnoah.com. And again, it will be coming to a theater near you. One of the things is that I'm really working very closely with the History Channel. And we are looking at doing a reality show on the History Channel. So I'm very, very hopeful that we'll have a new show out on the air next year in 2015. So if you could, I need your help. Go to aaronjudkins.com, and there's a little poll there on the website you can take. And I need your help in deciding what kind of show that you want to see. So anyway, I think we got our little glitch fixed here, and I want to make sure that everybody can hear me. So let's get back to Dr. Johnson. So Dr. Johnson, this is the Christmas special, The Star of Bethlehem, and I really wanted to, start off by saying you wrote a book that touches on this, and it's called The Pre-Flood Origins of Astrology. And in this book, you can find it on Amazon.com, The Pre-Flood Origins of Astrology by Dr. Ken Johnson. And you touch on this about, about these ancient history and from also the ancient records, other ancient records like the Dead Sea Scrolls, Book of Enoch. But we see that there's a history of astrology. But I want to ask you, how does that really connect with the Star of Bethlehem? Because there was at some point in the written record, there was a special star or a bright star that kind of led the way. And some people have, theories about what that star was and how it led, the wise men to Bethlehem. Let's just start out by asking, what is astrology, and why is it important to know the difference between the astrology from the pre-flood world and then how it's kind of, morphed into what we see today?
Well, basically, from a Christian standpoint, what the Bible teaches about prophecy and history, we know is correct. Satan always makes counterfeit religions, counterfeit supposed sciences. The Bible does talk about signs in the heavens and the fact that we're to watch for the festivals, which usually occur on new moons or full moons, and we're to watch for blood moons, different signs like that to see that God is doing something. And in addition to those things, there was a special prophecy given by Balaam back in Numbers 24 that specifically said that when the Messiah would come, a star would mark his birth. And so it's important to look at those things, but there's always a counterfeit on everything. There's a counterfeit works of the Spirit, counterfeit tongues, counterfeit healing, counterfeit gospel, anything like that. And so astrology is no different.
Okay, so how did the ancients in the past, how did they get involved with looking at this? Because we know from the ancient accounts that a lot of the cultures did look up at the stars. They were watching those constellations in the zodiac. We know the Hebrews call it the Mazzaroth, and they were, looking at these things. And even the scripture says that that they did use these things for signs and for seasons, to I guess, know when to plant, know when to harvest, those type of things. They knew that by the seasons and the stars. How did that get started early on in watching the stars for the signs and the seasons?
Well, in Genesis, it does talk about the sun, the moon, and the stars are for signs, seasons, and the festivals, basically. And so we have them for learning how to plant crops, when to hunt, when not to hunt, so that we have continual food. We also have the festivals that are given by God, and again, that's all based on a calendar, so you got to know when the calendar says what would happen. And God does things like that. The whole concept of the Mazzaroth in the Hebrew concept is that the constellation of the zodiac is a little different than what we have today, but each house represents a major thing, like a virgin birth, the coming of God, salvation, these type of things. And if there was, or whenever there would be, a star appearing in that constellation, like a supernova or a conjunction of planets, something that you would notice very easily at night, that tells you that whatever that constellation that predicted would be coming to pass. So, for instance, when you look up and in the sign of Coma, which is the baby associated with the Virgin, Virgo. So if there was a supernova in that, to where everybody at nighttime could look up and see it and almost read a book by it, a nice bright star or conjunction or something, then it would let you know that the baby that was supposed to be born of a virgin has been born. And this relates back to, like we were saying in Numbers, where Balaam prophesied this. It's just one more type of prophecy we're supposed to look to. The signs in the heavens, the prophecies in scriptures, and the Hebrew festivals. But in the ancient times, the world drifted away from God and began to practice a type of astrology. The main difference between the two is that you have zodiacs that teach something. And if a star was to appear, that means God is doing that, whatever it is we're talking about now. The horoscope idea, though, completely flips it around and makes it man-centered. So wherever I was born, wherever the planets were in those constellations when I was born compared to where they are right now, tells me that something good or bad is going to happen to my love life or my strife at work or this kind of thing. And so it's completely backwards. You're using this supposedly as some force that is there to show you what you can do to help you, rather than looking to see what God is doing. Astronomy basically is just a science on calculating the planets. So where would Venus be right now? So if I wanted to see it with a telescope, I should be able to plot that and figure out by 9 o'clock or something, if I go out and look toward the west or the north or the east, I should be able to find the star pattern, the constellation, or whatever it is I'm looking for. And that is just basic astronomy. As a matter of fact, in some of the ancient records, there's a text in the book of Josephus. Josephus was a Jewish historian who wrote a basic history up to his time, somewhere around 70 A.D. And in that history, he talks about the pre-flood world, the descendants of Seth, the godly line of Seth, basically learned the star patterns, the zodiac, the movements of the sun and the earth, and what they meant, and recorded them in a large, what they called a pillar, to preserve that knowledge for future generations, because they knew there was a prophecy of the world being destroyed by a flood. And Josephus actually said that pillar still existed in his day. And so we have these ancient writings of that, and of course that's not astrology, it's nothing evil or satanic. It's simply a knowledge of astronomy, and then knowing what God may be doing and being able to look for that at the appropriate time.
Okay. Well, that's pretty interesting. Now, let's talk about this star, because you said that the wise man, the Magi, back in Matthew 2, that the Magi knew about this star was coming because it was prophesied. They knew to look for it. And as a matter of fact, this went all the way back to the time of Daniel in the Old Testament, where they really mastered the art of astronomy, where they were looking for the signs and the seasons and the times, and that would tell them, about these things. But what were the Magi? Who were the Magi, and how did they know that precise date about the Bethlehem star?
Well, a couple of different things. Number one, if you are a believer, Jewish at that time, looking for the Messiah, you know about the prophecies given in Scripture. And basically, if you just knew about 4 or 5 basic prophecies, for instance, Daniel told from when a decree came, so many days later the Messiah would die, acting as priest, so he would have been born about 30 years before. So you know the general time period of his birth. You're told in Micah that he would be born in Bethlehem. You're told in Numbers by Balaam that a star would mark his birth. And you're told in Isaiah, I think it's 13 or 11, somewhere in there, Isaiah says that his name would be Yeshua. So if you just knew those prophecies, for instance, when the star appeared, you would know that that marked the Messiah's birth. So if you, at that point, would go to Jerusalem, to the temple, knowing that babies are brought in on the 8th day to be circumcised, whenever the star appeared, if you waited 8 days, went into the temple, waited for some couple from Bethlehem to come in who had a baby whose name was Yeshua, wanted to circumcise him, that would be the Messiah. And you see this is exactly what happened in Matthew, according to what was told about Simeon. Simeon knew from the prophecies, the Holy Spirit revealed to him that he would actually live long enough to hold the Messiah in his hands. And that's an amazing prophecy. But the Magi were Persian astrologers, astronomers. The word Magi originally means astrologer, like we would think of, like someone that forecasts a horoscope, that kind of thing. But in time, it became to mean a high person in the kingdom, much like a eunuch is somebody that has been surgically altered so that they would not bother someone's harem. But in the process of time, the word eunuch in some cultures meant a high-ranking official or somebody in the temple court. So, but we have these Magi that studied all these things. Some of the Magi learned about the Hebrew Scriptures, became Jewish in faith, but continued their profession in their countries where they were at. The Babylonians captured Israel, and Israel went into a 70-year captivity. And during this time, Daniel, who was one of the chief people in the government, he was made a eunuch. He knew the Hebrew Scriptures, the prophets. He was one of the better prophets. One of his titles, according to the book of Daniel, was the chief of the Magi, or the chief of the magicians, those chief of the wise people, or the wise men. And so they looked at him as being, this is kind of sort of what we do, but he is far more accurate than the rest of us. And so he began to have that title. But he would teach the Scriptures about the Messiah, his prophecies to people. Later on, when things broke, the Jews went back to Israel. But the Persians, when they captured the kingdom of Babylon, the Persian Magi would be ruling. Some of them also knew of the prophecies. As a matter of fact, chapter 2 of Matthew tells us all about the Bible's story of the Magi when they came to Jerusalem. But some of the early church fathers, there's one, Julius Africanus, who actually recorded from written records in the Persian courts the Magi's story about when they came and saw the Messiah and what they saw and why they came. And it corroborates what the Scripture says, of course, but it gives us more information. That's why I always like going back. Mm-hmm.
There's other accounts of this other than the Bible, you're saying?
Yes.
Is there any other accounts? You said there's one in the Persian record. Is there any in any other record that you know of?
Well, the church fathers talk about it a little bit. Origen makes mention that they were not Chaldeans, they were Persians, and that they had the prophecies of Balaam as taught from Daniel. So they would have known about the star prophecy. They probably didn't have Micah, apparently, and that's why in Matthew's version of the story, they come in thinking, well, they go to the capital. I mean, if the baby is going to be a king, he's probably in the palace, right? So they go to the capital and say, where's the child? And Herod has no idea. He has to call the Bible scholars, and they say, oh, no, the prophecy says he'd be born in Bethlehem. And so they take off to go to Bethlehem to find the baby. So they definitely knew about the star prophecy. They didn't know about Micah's prophecy, but they were believers.
Now, are you talking about, when you're talking about the Magi, are you talking about that there was a kind of a science to what they were following from the time of Daniel? There was a science to it?
Yeah, actually, the way that it's supposed to work is, again, when we talk about a zodiac and astrology, what we have mainly is the Greek version. So we have in our zodiac things like Perseus and other creatures and things like that, Libra. But in the Hebrew zodiac, if you go back, and each culture is a little different, but you go back to the really old zodiacs, the names of the constellations and the names of the stars in those constellations, they all have names. So
right.
If you just look at these, you'll learn that it doesn't. For instance, like a good example is Ursa Minor and Ursa Major. On our zodiac, they're bears. Okay, in the ancient Hebrew zodiac, they're not bears. They're like folds where sheep are at, or houses, or things like that. So first off, you have to know what they actually symbolize and what the stars symbolize. So, for instance, in the constellation of Virgo, it was called Bethula, which also means virgin, and the constellation right north of it was called Coma, which is supposed to be hair or a comb or something in Greek astrology. But in the ancient the Hebrew zodiac, it's actually a baby, and it's supposed to represent the baby born of the virgin. And so if you know that, for instance, and all of a sudden a supernova or conjunction or whatever, a great light appears in that particular constellation of Coma, it's logical to assume the prophecy of the baby born of the virgin has just happened. And of course,
Wow.
That's one of the things that they record. But the way this is supposed to work is then you know what the constellations and the stars mean, but there's no prophecy of dates or when things happen. You just wait. And when you see a supernova, then something happened. So that's the way that science is supposed to work. There's supposed to also be, and I don't really know how this works, but there's supposed to also be a way to look at the star patterns, when it occurred and where the star is at exactly, and figure out not only when, like 2 days ago it occurred somewhere on Earth, but somehow to figure out exactly where on Earth or approximately where on Earth it's supposed to be. There was a scientist, as a matter of fact, most of us are probably familiar with Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was a scientist, invented the theory of gravity and rotation of planets and this type of stuff. He was also a Christian. He also wrote a commentary on the book of Revelation. And one of his writings on, I forget the name of it, but it's on mathematics and earthquakes and tectonic plates, that kind of thing. It's interesting. It's written in Latin. And there's actually a original version of it I live in Kansas City, and in the Linda Hall Library in Kansas City, they actually have a copy of this. And so I went there to kind of look at it, and of course it's in Latin, it's old, 1600, so it's under glass, so I couldn't really do anything with it. But in there, he talks about the science of the Magi, and he doesn't explain a whole lot, but basically he writes like he knew how they did it. And he actually uses that also to be able to predict earthquakes, just a different version of it. And it's based on using the concept of the planets and the pull, much like we know the moon causes the tides to rise and fall.
Yeah, sure.
And so he was able to, according to legend, he was able to accurately predict earthquakes up to 100 years after his death. So it's pretty amazing. And I don't know how they do that, but apparently it's just part of that science.
Huh. Is it accurate though? I mean, you were talking about the Hebrew Mazzaroth and you know how their symbols in the constellations are different than the Greek symbols that we're used to seeing now. But does that, in the original version of that, does that tell a story in the stars, those constellations? I think, 48 constellations, and each constellation has a 3 deacon constellations, which are 3 minor constellations. Is that correct?
Right. I think there's 48 major ones total. There's the 12, which are the main ones where the constellations that the sun goes through. So it'd be the 12 that we know as the zodiac or the Mazzaroth. Right. And then connected with each major one, there are 3 minor ones. And so like we talked about, Virgo is one of the major ones. That's a constellation in the zodiac. One of the deacons for that is Coma, which if you look at the Greek version, it's hair or it's a comb. If you look at the Hebrew and ancient Egyptian ones, it's a baby. And so that kind of thing. So yeah, the whole concept, and this is according to what Josephus taught about what the Sethites recorded and kept, was number one, the planets going through the zodiac, and so we use that to figure out the months and the years for just basic calendars, planting. And then also that the zodiac paints a picture. And if you know the Hebrew names of the zodiacs and the stars, and whenever you see a constellation, there's somewhere in that constellation a supernova or a new star appear, then you know that something has happened like that. I'm always trying to go back and recreate it because there's a lot of things to do. I think it's going to be very difficult, but I think it would be interesting to go back and maybe through NASA's websites to find all the major supernovas over a certain brightness. And if we have a good record of exactly when they occurred, go back and look where they were closest to what stars, what constellations, and see what happened in Judaism, in Israeli history, or in the church history at the time. I think it would be really fascinating.
I know there's computer software for star charts that will revert you back in time, and essentially go back in time with those star charts. I think that's pretty cool. When I was doing some research out in New Mexico on the Los Lunas Mystery Stone, there's a zodiac embedded in it's a petroglyph in the rock, and we think it's a zodiac map, and that shows a supernova, and some others have ran that back to a certain time frame, and they're getting some BC dates on that, which is kind of interesting. Is it true that the original names of the stars were in Arabic, and that they all had the same meaning of the name, although in different cultures they may have had their own name, but didn't they have the same meaning to each star, which was very specific to, like, say, in the constellation of Orion, that you got Betelgeuse and then you have Regulus, and those stars mean something very specific. I guess, Dr. Johnson, let me have you answer that, because we're at the bottom of the hour here. Let me get back to that question. We're going to take a short.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Hello, Inception Radio Network. Would you like your favorite show to be played again live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's live request portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's live request portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, even write a dedication message, and that's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the live request tab under the show menu. Now playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again. Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Howdy, this is Joe Mars. I'm inviting you to tune in to Epic Voyages, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday nights, right here on Inception Radio Network. To find out more about Epic and how you can become a member, visit epicvoyagers.com. That's EPICVOYAGERS.com.
Man vs. Archaeology with Aaron Judkins. It's about digging up the past, exposing forbidden archaeology, and discovering our hidden history. What are these mysteries of our past, and why are they important to our future? Learn more at aaronjudkins.com.
And welcome back to Epic Voyages Radio. I am your host, Maverick, here this evening with our special guest, Dr. Ken Johnson, on our special Christmas episode here, The Star of Bethlehem and the Pre-Flood Origins of Astrology. We were talking just a little bit about the zodiac and the difference between astrology and astronomy. But Dr. Johnson, let's talk about those Persians again, because you said they had a written account that was found outside of the Bible that talks about this. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah. Basically, the Bible says that Magi, wise men, came seeking the child because they saw his star and they wanted to give him homage. And, of course, they inquired where he was at, went to Bethlehem, found him, did what they came to do, and then went back wherever they came from. And this account in Matthew doesn't give us a whole lot of detail of who they are or where they're from, just what happened, which incidentally, that was a prophecy recorded back in, I think, in Isaiah 60 or 61. So what Matthew's trying to do is show that all these events that took place were actually prophesied. And so this definitely proves that Jesus is the Messiah. But the early church fathers would record a lot of history in addition to those things. And one church father, Julius Africanus, recorded what he said was the story, the same thing in Matthew, but from the Persians or from the Magi themselves. And it's a really interesting story. Basically, the Persians worshipped multiple gods. And one day the king had this really strange dream. So he wakes up in the middle of the night and he goes to the temple to try to find the Magi, to interpret the dream. And he begins to tell them what happened. As some of these Magi are pagan, of course, and some of them have studied the prophecies of Daniel and studied the Jewish religion, and some of them are actually believers, not too many. But the king tells this story that he has this dream that he's in the temple, and the statues, the gods, basically quiver and then fall down and break, all of them except one, which was the goddess Page. And he describes how this star came down and stopped in her crown. And he describes the crown as being green and certain colors, and then it goes on down into her. And then there are other colors and crystals in the crown. And then a voice says, "Our time is over." And it just really scares him. And so he describes this dream to them. And most of the Magi have no idea what it is. Some of the Magi come up and say, well, we know what it is. Number one, there is a prophecy that a star would appear that would mark when the Jewish Messiah would be born, that he would be born of a virgin. And his star has appeared recently. So we know that is taking place. You've had a dream that the era of the gods is no more. And the way you're describing the star coming down is none other than God himself incarnating in human form, as the prophecies dictate. The goddess Page, we know, was simply a queen from a long time ago that's dead and buried. But she also represents the constellation of Virgo, which represents the virgin that would be giving birth to the Messiah. And he describes the colors in the crown and the jewels that he saw on the goddess statue, and interprets them as the colors for the breastplate of the tribe of Judah, which means the king would be born, and also of the tribe of Levi. So this man is a God, priest, king combination. And so basically they say, our recommendation for you would be to put together a team to go to Jerusalem and find the newborn king. And so the king does that exactly. And it's a really interesting story. They travel to Jerusalem and get met with nothing but, yeah, you shouldn't be here, go away, we don't know what you're talking about. And they basically say, look, we've come all this way to see the king, the incarnated Christ, whom you are supposed to be worshiping, and yet you don't seem to care. And they start to kind of threaten or try to bribe them, and their attitude is, look, we follow our king, not yours, and we really don't care what you think. We want to see the child. So finally they get the information that he's born in Bethlehem. So they go from Jerusalem down to Bethlehem, and they describe their meeting when they finally found Mary and the baby and presented the gifts to them. And it's interesting, they actually mentioned that, since they're Gentiles, Jews are not supposed to have images or paintings or anything like that. Gentiles, of course, do. And so the story continues saying that they brought with them an artist who actually painted a picture of the baby Jesus on Mary's lap. And that was supposedly taken along with the records and put in the Persian archives. And so it's a really interesting story that Julius Africanus gives us. But all that together basically just tells us that the other legends of what the church fathers talked about is true, that some of the Persians studied under Daniel when they were all in Babylon, and Cyrus conquered Babylon, and that some of them accepted Judaism or awaited the Messiah, turned away from paganism, and some didn't. And that they knew about the science of the Magi, the whole idea that when certain stars occur in certain places, they mean things. So if the Messiah was to be born, a star was to mark his birth, we know what star that would be. When it finally appears, that means the Messiah has happened. And of course, at that point, their king had a dream. So it all meshed in very well. So they got together a group of people and went and found the Messiah. So it just corroborates what Matthew says. And it's a really interesting story, as many other church father stories are.
Okay, so you're saying that the Magi were astronomers. They had a scientific observation of the heaven that was influenced by Daniel and the other Old Testament prophets. There was a clear message that was seen in the zodiac, especially in that Hebrew Mazzaroth, in the constellation from Virgo, the Virgin, ending with Leo, the King, and then later on being somehow distorted in Babylon and Greece to predict as astrology for future events. And wasn't, now let me ask you this, because I asked you a question before we went to break, and we haven't answered that yet. A lot of the cultures around the world have the same meaning for those stars. And I use the example of Orion, the constellation, and there's, in that star constellation, there's stars. One is Betelgeuse, one is Regulus, and they have meanings, but those meanings are the same around every culture. Why do you think that is?
That's true. If you go back to the older zodiacs, they all have basically the same meanings for the constellations and for the stars. Once you get up to a certain time period from the Greeks and forward, some of that is still the same, and some of it has been changed or corrupted. One thing that I think is super clear is Virgo the Virgin, or whatever name she has in that culture. It almost always means a virgin that has a child, which is kind of interesting. And I think it's just a distant memory of what the original zodiac and prophecies and things were supposed to be. The early church fathers and the ancient rabbis tell of the pre-flood pagan religion, which basically went away from the concept of God creating us into the idea that we're evolving into gods. And originally they had a form of astrology without horoscopes, and it was basically just to plot the times. Usually it was connected with teraphim, and when, like, for instance, my grandfather would die, his death date would be marked on a small idol, and I would use that idol supposedly to communicate with him. And that's kind of where astrology started in the pre-flood world, and it led the people away from focusing on what God would do in the future to what they did. And the church fathers said sometime after the flood, and when the paganism started coming back in again, the Chaldeans changed it yet again and made a horoscope out of it. And it's interesting to me because when you look at these things, the horoscope idea, if Venus is in the right house compared to where it was when I was born, my love life might improve. If Mars is in a certain place, I'd have strife at work. If Mercury's in a certain place, I would, get wealthy, that kind of thing. And when you go back and you look at these things, the church fathers did a lot of research into history in order to witness to people. And they found out, for instance, Venus was a princess on the island of Cyprus, that after a war, most of the men had gone, so she taught the women of Cyprus to practice prostitution as a means of gain, not in connection with religion, but just as the world's first post-flood madam. Mars was supposed to be in Greece, and he was supposed to be probably one of the world's best fighters. And Mercury was known to be in Egypt to be a very small man, and he was actually a thief. He was one of these guys that's very, very small, and he could actually sneak into windows that most people couldn't fit into. So he was known to be a thief. So when you look at that, those stars that are named after these people that eventually became to be worshipped as gods, Venus and Mars and Mercury, how could dead people from several thousand years ago that were just kings and queens after the flood, later deified, have anything to do whether I'm going to get married or have strife at work or get wealthy? And so you begin to see how these things were just added later, and the horoscope concept is a complete perversion of even the ancient perversion. It's completely messed up. And so again, we need to throw away astrology in general and go back to just understanding what the Bible says about the ancient histories and the prophecies in the stars.
Now, you were talking about the supernovas, and supernovas have been suggested as a candidate for the Star of Bethlehem. I know that there was a visible supernova back in 1054 AD, which was called the Chinese star. In AD 1572, Tycho star. Again, in 1604, Kepler star. On a date corresponding to July 5th BC, the Chinese astronomy records record a quote guest star, which was a nova in the constellation Aquila. Something interesting too, from an archaeological sense, is that they excavated in Rome a garden wall that dated to the time of Caesar Augustus, and it showed a painting of a tree with a fruit cluster in the configuration of the star constellation. So an extra fruit is shown where the nova had occurred in this painting. So it's interesting that this nova, this Cygnus X1, appeared to be in the Northern Cross. And intersecting a star called Deneb, D-E-N-E-B, Deneb, which means the Lord comes at the head of the cross. And then you have the star Altair, which means the wounding. I talked about how those stars have names, and Altair means the wounding. Vega means he shall be exalted. Those stars are nearby. So isn't it our entire solar system is moving toward Vega currently, and isn't that kind of giving a well, I say currently, back at the time of the birth during the Star of Bethlehem, it was moving towards Vega. And wouldn't that make some kind of a celestial announcement that the birth of a king is actually being foretold?
Yeah, I believe so. We have all of those examples. Again, coming from like 2,000 or 3,000 years after the fact, it's really hard to pull everything together. But if we can find an accurate representation of what each star and each constellation means, and then go back and get an accurate representation of when the supernovas occurred, a very interesting picture would be painted. And that's what I would love to do, but it's easy to recalculate where the planets would be and where the sun would be at a given date, but when the supernovas occurred would have to just be a recording, basically on, like you were talking about, carved on walls and
right.
and the records of the Chinese astrologers. But yeah, it would definitely paint a complete picture, and I think that's what the ancients talked about, the church fathers, Josephus, and all these people talked about. And it makes sense that if God gave us that for a calendar, and the Messianic festivals for times when prophecies would occur, and then also star patterns, so whenever it's supposed to happen, it's just marked by a large light, so to speak. Then I think if we have all that together, we should really understand and know what God is doing. And it makes sense that if all that is true, then Satan would want to make a counteraction to all that kind of stuff. Fake prophecies, astrology to get us away from looking at the science of the Magi, or talk about the Magi being astrologers in the Bible, therefore the Bible may be okay as astrology, and get you going out and looking at things that are obviously not true. So anything to get you to go away from the truth that's presented.
I was telling about those supernovas and how Johann Kepler, back in 1604, it was called Kepler's star. It was actually a visible supernova in 1604. But I know Johann Kepler was an astronomer, and in 1605, he suggested that the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter and Mars was the Star of Bethlehem. So to the Persian Magi, Saturn would represent Jerusalem, and Jupiter would represent royalty, whereas Pisces and Virgo in the constellations would represent the Hebrews. So did Johann Kepler, do you think he had some, is there some truth in that there was a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter and Mars to be the Star of Bethlehem?
I think it's a definite possibility. From what I'm reading on all of these things, the concept is that whenever you see a large light at a certain place, you find out which star and constellation it's near, and that tells you what is going on right now, what God is doing. So whether it's a constellation or a supernova, or several planets that come together to form a really bright star, either one would be fine. It's just some sort of a very large light, and it has to be something that you would notice. And of course, in the city, we probably don't notice much of anything, but if you're out in the country, you're traveling at night, especially around a new moon, it's really, really dark. But if all of a sudden a light came that's as bright as a full moon, for instance, everybody would really notice it. So at a certain brightness, again, it would make everybody notice what's going on, and it wouldn't matter whether it's a conjunction or a supernova. So it could definitely be. And I think Kepler And it makes sense because we're coming from a time where most people are Christian or at least Catholic and or Jewish, and they're trying to understand more of science. A lot of the people that did the experiments in early medicine were also alchemists. Now, alchemy is probably not anything we'd really want to mess with. Some of them actually got like mercury poisoning and this kind of stuff. But it's as a scientist would experiment with everything. So if you begin to realize the stars are there, how to plot them, how to make accurate calendars, and you're coming from a Christian Hebrew concept, and you know the prophecies are real, and you're also looking at these other things, naturally you would explore those. So I think Kepler definitely had the idea, and he may be right and he may be wrong on it being that conjunction, but obviously there was some sort of a star or some sort of a large light that everybody knew marked the birth of the Messiah. And I just think that's fascinating that different scientists coming from different backgrounds basically come to the same conclusion on this type of stuff.
Wow, that's interesting. So we know that, this was a real event in history, whether it was supernova or a conjunction of the planets in the constellations. But again, this was for signs and seasons and times, and this was, according to the science of the Magi, they knew something was going to happen, but not just because there was a bright light in the sky. Is because the stars and the constellations, they knew the meaning of those, and when something happens and there's a supernova that goes through that, or there's a conjunction of the stars or the planets with those meanings of the names in those constellations, man, that's pretty significant. I mean, they knew, according to that hey, something big's happening here, because after all, there was ancient prophecies about a foretold virgin birth of a Hebrew king, and we know that that starts in the constellation Virgo, the Virgin of this God child king being born a man. What a story!
Yeah, it's amazing when you think about it, and if you study that kind of thing, I think today we are so overloaded with knowledge. I mean, there's the internet and TV and all this other stuff. But if we would be to put that stuff away, put ourselves back in a simpler time where we have books to read and things to think about, not a whole lot either, but again, if you know there are prophecies and you believe in God or gods and you see some things happen and you know the prophecy about a virgin birth approximately at a certain time and a star to mark his birth, and you know some of these legends and some of the astrology from, pagans and everybody, and all of a sudden you see a star in a certain constellation and you go, wait a minute, that marks the child of a virgin. There was a prophecy about the Hebrews. Hey, it doesn't take, a whole lot to put two and two together. I wonder, hey, why don't we go over there and see if a child has been born? And so it's pretty amazing when you think about it.
But, Go ahead.
Or I was just going to say, like my example of Simeon in the temple. It's about the right time. A star marked the birth. The baby would come in at 8 days old to be circumcised, so that would be next Tuesday. It would have to be a couple from Bethlehem that named him Yeshua. And Bethlehem's a small town, so there's not going to be too many people that come in with a baby next Tuesday, And so it's not hard to put two and two together like that when you know some of the prophecies.
Well, and those Magi knew that there was a birth of a king, because they brought those gifts that we know of from the biblical story, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and
right.
And look, those were expensive items back then. That wasn't just a normal everyday thing. I mean, that's some expense. Well, we all know gold, but frankincense and myrrh were expensive. Mm-hmm. They knew that this was a special birth.
Plus, they didn't have automobiles and planes. So if you're going to take time off from work and travel a few months to find a supposed baby somewhere, most people would say, man, you're insane. Well, no, I've seen the prophecies. I've seen the stars. There's just too much to it from all sorts of different angles for there not to be something. And so I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to take time off. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to find the child.
Yeah. Well, I know back in August 12th, 3 BC, that Jupiter rose as a morning star, and it came into conjunction with Venus. We know that from the going back in the star charts, and when you look at this journey that Jupiter has, it actually takes a retrograde motion, and appears to be stationary briefly over a short period of time over Bethlehem on December 25th, 2 BC. And so here's Jupiter, the king planet, which what Kepler was saying, conjuncted with Venus, and now conjuncting with the king star Regulus. That's the Jewish Messiah, and the star, the king star Regulus, in the constellation of Leo, which is the constellation of Judah from the Hebrews, and located also in the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin. So it's quite amazing, I think, that when Joseph and Mary began their journey to go to Bethlehem because she was pregnant for the census, for the close of the Jewish civil year, they had to go for the census. But look, when they got there, they didn't have any place to go. And it's quite interesting that they had to go to a manger. We're going to pick this up right after our break here with Dr. Ken Johnson on our special Christmas edition.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, Bob Tarmac for MJ'sHealthyWay.com. Are you into vitamins, nutrition, meal replacements, health shakes, keeping your body in good shape, your internal engine going? Boy, do I have a perfect place for you. MJ'sHealthyWay.com. They offer the best service and products, and they'll tell you anything you need to know about any product they have to offer. I get all my vitamins, meal replacements, shakes from MJ'sHealthyWay.com. That's spelled MJSHealthyway.com. There's so much more at the website. Go check it out. MJ'sHealthyway.com.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Looking for a cure for boredom? Never worry, IRN's interactive website introduces a number of ways to pass time while you listen to your favorite show. Choose anything from the IRN Chat Lounge, Game Lounge, Video Lounge, or the Mood Lounge. These fun, exciting features let you chat in real time with fellow listeners, view live sky watches, play daily posted online games, or pick a show based on topic. The choices are endless, so use your time wisely by keeping it all on IRN.
Man vs. Archaeology with Aaron Judkins. It's about digging up the past, exposing forbidden archaeology, and discovering our hidden history. What are these mysteries of our past, and why are they important to our future? Learn more at aaronjudkins.com.
Hello, I'm Pat Usford, inviting you to tune in to Epic Voyages every Monday evening at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on Inception Radio Network. To find out more about Epic and how you can become a member, visit epicvoyagers.com.
Welcome back to Epic Voyages Radio. I am your host, Maverick, coming to you with our special Christmas edition here, the Star of Bethlehem. Dr. Ken Johnson is our guest tonight. We're talking about the pre-flood origins of astrology and what the Star of Bethlehem was. If you have questions for Dr. Johnson tonight, be sure to send us your questions either through the live chat room at InceptionRadioNetwork.com or through our toll-free number, 1-888-919-2355. 1-888-919-2355. And be sure to call us. We got one more hour here with Dr. Ken Johnson, and we do have a caller on the line, Bill from New York. Are you there, sir?
Yes, sir. How are you, Aaron, and how are you, Dr. Johnson?
Doing well, thank you.
Doing great, Bill. What's your
Happy
question?
holidays. Okay, I have a couple. Just the first one, quickly. Some researchers indicate that with the use of star charts and the location from the biblical accounts, that Jesus may have been born in September. What is Dr. Johnson's thoughts on that?
I think that's a definite possibility. We have the Messianic Festivals that teach prophecy. And one of the things is, I mean, like in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, it talks about Jesus as our Passover lamb and that he died on Passover and that we're supposed to purge out the leaven or the sin. So he's going through talking about all the festivals and the rituals on the Messianic festivals that teach prophecy and how they're integrated. When we get to John chapter 1, verse 14, it talks about the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. John uses a special word there for dwelt, shkenu, I believe it is, and it's an idiom from Hebrew. It comes from Sukkot, which means tabernacle. So you can actually say that Jesus tabernacled among us. Tabernacles is in September to October. It varies, much like Easter does on March or April. And so a lot of people believe that Jesus was born on the Festival of Tabernacles, which would make some sense. There's a lot of other things that you could look at, but yeah, it's a definite possibility.
And quickly, my second question, if this star were to appear sometime in the future, would some take that as a prophetic sign that it could be the second coming of Christ?
Yeah, that's a definite possibility. Again, what we would really want to do is to learn the constellation and the stars in Hebrew and make sure we're looking at really ancient texts. And if we've figured out the virgin birth, which would be the first coming, there should be some star and or constellation that shows the second coming. And so that would definitely be something to look at there.
Well, that's interesting.
And just one, I'm sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, I was just saying that's a very interesting question. What's your other question?
Just one more quick one. Is there any evidence, because you hear all these people speaking about this, any evidence that there may have been a bloodline related to Jesus?
A bloodline in what way? You mean like him having children?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's there's a lot of pagan groups that and cultic type groups that talk like that. The basic idea is that, there's a lineage and there is a Messiah around here somewhere today. It could be something that is definitely incorporated in what the Antichrist will do, saying that he is Christ or a type of Christ or whatever. But biblically, we're told that Jesus incarnated in human form. He did not have children. He died and resurrected and ascended and would come back in the same form. Christians believe not in reincarnation, but in physical resurrection. So he wouldn't come back, or there wouldn't be a descendant or anything like that. But there have been several groups and several cults and secret societies throughout the Middle Ages that have went that direction with their theories.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you, Dr. Johnson and Aaron, and you guys have a great holidays.
You too. Thanks, Bill, for calling in.
Bye-bye.
That's interesting, Dr. Johnson, that Bill asked you about if December 25th was the actual birthday of Christ. Let's talk about that just a minute, because I know that a lot of people say, you know what, that's probably not accurate. That's probably not right. And I've always thought, it may not be December 25th. Can we know? I know that some people have suggested that it's in September, like Bill was referring to, and you even said yes, that's possible. But going back, that it's not just in September, but there was a conjunction. We talked about that conjunction in 3 BC with Jupiter, representing the king planet, in conjunction with Regulus, the kingship star, in conjunction with the constellation Leo the Lion and Virgo, and this would be a sign of a birth of a leader, not just a leader, of a king, not just a king, but the king of the Hebrews, the king of the Jews. And some say that he was born on the Day of Trumpets, just like you had alluded to just a few moments ago. Not just on the Day of Trumpets. If we're looking at September, back in that time period of 3 BC, then we're looking at September 11th, 3 BC, the Day of Trumpets, when all that happened. Because we know on September 14th that Jupiter came into union with Regulus and began that circling crown effect, which took place during the early months of Jesus's infancy, and basically announcing that there's been a birth of a king. What do you think? Is September 11th, 3 BC, a historical date for the birth of Christ? Is it a good candidate?
Actually, it is. I thought it was interesting. I've always believed that Jesus would have been born on Tabernacles. Other people put it on Festival of Trumpets. Again, that's within 10 days of each other. And it's a definite possibility based on what John says and other messianic thoughts and symbols. But looking at that, I thought it was interesting. I never really went back and looked at it. For instance, I went back on the Jewish calendar to figure out what's the date I was born. Did I fall on a festival, or what portion of the Torah would I be reading if I was Jewish? But I never thought about going back, and if that's Christ's birth date that year, what would it be? And my wife actually did that. She went back and said, well, if your calculations are right and it was that year and it was Tabernacles, you realize that's September 11th, don't you? And it's like, no, I never really looked at that before. But yeah, definite possibility. And I think that's really interesting how those dates would come up like that. As to the 25th of December, yes, one of the things we have to realize, again, we can't really prove necessarily that Christ wasn't born on December 25th, I suppose. But what we can prove is by looking at history, some of the things that happen. The 21st, of course, 21st, 22nd is the solstice. And at that point, the people that worship the sun, it would be the time that the sun is reborn and days start getting longer and this type of stuff. And so somewhere along the line, the church wanted to incorporate those type of things, because some people would be pagan simply because of the holidays and the rituals. And if you would incorporate those, maybe it would help them to be Christian. Same kind of a thing happened with the fact that you recognized when people were martyred, set aside a day to remember the martyrs. But when you have more than 365 of them, you can't take every day of the calendar. So they had to pick a day for Martyrs' Day, for instance. And they combined that with what we call Halloween or All Saints' Day. And so we can see the church in the medieval times definitely taking pagan holidays and Christianizing them, at least as far as the dates are concerned. And their idea behind that, I think, was that if people keep their days off, their parties, so to speak, but it becomes Christian in theme, it will help us Christianize the world. And that may have worked in certain circles, but it also has the reverse, too. We have pagan concepts that tend to creep into the church. And I think that's what we've done. So Halloween is like 99% pagan, with just that one small part of Christianity to it, or the idea of looking at the saints. Christmas, on the other hand, is mainly Christian in nature, but the date and a few of the other legends that incorporate into it are from paganism. So we know that happened. So that's how we got All Souls Day and Christmas Eve specifically. And I don't think that those are the exact dates for the birth of Christ or anything, much like Easter. We know Jesus was crucified on the 14th of Nisan, which would be Passover. And sometimes on the calendar, it actually falls on the same day. So Easter really is Easter. A lot of times it's not. It's a week or two off from the exact date on when he was crucified. And we know that Easter itself has a little bit of pagan in some of the rituals also. So we know that that happened for sure.
I think it's interesting. I've had people ask me, well, we're not celebrating Christmas because it's on December 25th. And, that wasn't really when Christ was born. And, that's probably a pagan holiday. So we're not going to celebrate it. And look, I have to just say this. It doesn't matter to me. I think we're missing the point. The greater point is, whether we celebrate it on December 25th or September 11th or whatever day, I think the point is we're recognizing, the meaning behind Christmas. And that is, the birth of Christ and the virgin birth. And the King of the Jews was born. And this was the God-man king that really was prophesied in the ancient scriptures to be born on a specific day in a specific region for a specific purpose, so that man could have redemption, and have that a redemptive act on the cross. And without any of that, according to at least the Christian faith, is that we have no hope. But I think we're missing the meaning of that. And I understand if people don't want to celebrate on December 25th, it's okay with me. I'm still going to be your friend. But don't throw rocks at me if I'm going to do it, because, I think it's the meaning behind the thing. I'm not intentionally celebrating a pagan ritual, where we are compromising our moral beliefs. I'm not going to do that. But I think it's the meaning behind why we celebrate it. And I don't know. I do understand this, that back in the 3rd century, that Roman emperor, that I think it was Aurelian, that proclaimed the winter solstice, December 25th, as the feast day dedicated to the Roman sun god Sol, S-O-L. And with the advent of that winter solstice, each day becomes longer, as the days go on, those winter days become increasingly longer. And the decree went out from the Roman emperor that the followers of Christ, the Christians, would be allowed to celebrate on December 25th, because it was convenient to share that holiday, the birth of Christ, with the Roman celebration of the sun god Sol, S-O-L. So this date was determined by the Romans, not the Bible. And I think that's what you're saying. As a matter of fact, the Bible gives no exact date as when all this happened, but it leaves us clues, and we can go back and look at this. And I think it's a very interesting possibility that the Lord was actually born on September 11th, 3 BC, on the Day of Trumpets, not on December 25th. Does that make any sense? Do you agree with the December 25th date, that's the reason why we celebrate Christmas, because of the celebration of the Roman sun god Sol, and that it was allowed to be combined with the Roman holiday, so everybody would have the same holiday?
Yeah, that's basically what I've always heard too. Either the church and or the Roman or both did that for convenience and for control. But I think it's interesting, your whole concept there of we don't want to do anything pagan, and I think it's really easy to pull the little pagan pieces out and toss them aside, and whatever date you celebrate, it doesn't really matter. As a matter of fact, there's an interesting story amongst the church fathers. There was a church father by the name of Polycarp. Polycarp had worked with the Apostle John for a number of years planting churches. And when the controversy came up on should we celebrate the 14th of Nisan as the death of the Messiah, or that following Sunday, the resurrection day. Should it be a Sunday or should it be the exact day, And so that became a problem, and they eventually decided you have to do Easter Sunday, But in the process, when that started coming up, Polycarp made a comment that this had come up before, and he went and asked the Apostle John what John had recommended. And John said, any time you set aside any time to focus on Jesus or the Messiah is a good thing. Why not do both? Of course, this is coming from a Jew that's rock solid in Jewish tradition. And so I think that we can take that and extrapolate it from not just the death, but the birth also. If we celebrated tabernacles, if we celebrate Christmas, as long as we focus on the Messiah, it's a good idea to do both. That's what Polycarp would have said.
Well, that is interesting. I just don't, at least for me, I'm not celebrating the Roman sun god Sol, but I understand that there was combinations, or very close dates to these holidays. And look, I agree. There's a lot of things that's got thrown into the mix, and we just kind of lose the meaning about the whole thing, at least the original meaning. And we see with all the holidays, Easter and Christmas, and I think it's important that we learn about the origins of these things, so we would have some wisdom about why we do what we do. And that's why I like doing these shows and having people on like you, Dr. Johnson, who can explain why the Star of Bethlehem is important. Because you're saying this was a real event that pointed to a real birth, that points to a real person. I was talking about the wise man, the Magi coming to Bethlehem, and it says, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and have come to worship him. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was, and that was right over Bethlehem. Now, I was going to tell you this before the break, and I have to say that, the modern-day city of Bethlehem is only 5 miles from Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. But the modern-day city of Bethlehem is not the original city of Bethlehem back when Christ was born. I had mentioned that Christ was born in the manger. I'm an archaeologist. That's one of the things I do. And we think, have looked at some sites in the original town of Bethlehem that gives credence to the original manger site, and the Tower of the Flock, where these sheep were kept in a special area. They were segregated from the normal flocks because they were raised for temple sacrifices. And when you talk about illusions and comparisons, Jesus born in a manger on the side of the Tower of the Flock, where there was no room for them in the end. They had to go into a manger where the goats and the sheep were kept. And yet the Lamb of God comes out as a sacrifice for mankind that died a Roman crucifixion. How powerful is that when you have a king born in a manger that's representative of the ultimate sacrifice that would be made? I think it's fascinating, really. I know that, Cyrenius was governor of Syria during that time. Syria, I think it was, wasn't it? he basically was one of the best at taking censuses during that time. And he basically was, census taking was something that the Romans did, but this was one of the most important census taking in history because they had accurate documentation on this. And we know that the census was the registration that occurred back in 32 BC. But this was an actual oath that you had to take to the legions demanded by Caesar Augustus and proclaim that he was, Caesar over that area. Rome controlled that area of the Middle East, and specifically Jerusalem and Judea and all that. So Joseph and Mary, being descendants of David, they were required to make that trip back to Bethlehem. And that's when we see that this was actually coinciding with the 25th Jubilee year of the Roman emperor and the 750th year, the founding of Rome. So this wasn't just a normal census-taking event. This was a big thing because it was a huge, huge decree by Cyrenius with this census and Caesar Augustus that says, you know what, I am the emperor over Rome and basically over the whole known world at that time. And I think when this conjunction of the Star of Bethlehem happened, however it happened with the planets and stars and the constellations, I think they really, at least from the Roman perspective, I think when they saw that, it was kind of like, oh, hey, this special time has occurred, and it's really making a very clear message that Rome ruled the world, and I think they were trying to use that maybe as kind of a convincing argument that Caesar Augustus was the reigning emperor of the time, but unknown to them was a secret prophecy that was stirring around the Hebrews and the Magi that, there's another king around here that's been born, and he's not one of you guys. He's not from Rome, and he is going to be another king in line. And we see Herod at that time coming and saying, wait a minute, maybe we need to kill all these male Jews that are 2 years and younger. Why would he choose all the males 2 years and younger?
Well, the Magi had told him they had been following the star for 2 years, or that's when it had appeared. Again, remember, it takes a long time to cross the desert when you're on camels, as opposed to modern-day travel. But so he wanted to go back and make sure that anybody born in that area all the way up, anyone in that time period would be killed. And of course, it's supposed to be a king, so you don't necessarily need to kill off the girls. But I think that's totally insane, because if you think about it, if the prophecy is false, then nothing's going to happen anyway. If the prophecy is true and God's behind something, that person's not going to be killed anyway. And if you attack him, you're probably going to get killed. So he's not using very much sense. Plus, even if the baby born this year or last year becomes king, that's probably in 20 or 30 years from now. So it's not going to affect your reign any. But still, he just was insane, wanted his way, wanted to make sure that nobody would try to take the throne.
Yeah, and we see that Herod was a pretty wicked guy. I mean, he was evil. He killed his wife off and his sons, and he died a very slow, horrible death. Just not a nice guy. It's interesting that the Magi actually did not go back the way, because he said, hey, when you find him, come and tell me so I can come and worship him too. But somehow the Magi knew this guy's up to no good. So, when they found him, they didn't actually go back the same way they came. They went a different route. And then Herod is like, hey, well, I'm just going to kill all these male Jews 2 years and younger, and we'll knock him out that way. Very interesting. They just in archaeological terms, they just found recently the burial site of Herod, and I think that's pretty fascinating. That again, archaeological evidence is confirming that these stories are true, and that these guys really existed. What an amazing thing. Do you think that by the time those guys actually got to Christ, that he was about 2 years old when they presented him with these gifts?
I think so. They talked about the young child in their records, and then also in Matthew it talks about when they found the mother and the young child in the house. So I mean, it's like it's been a little bit of time, so that it took them a while to find him. So it's interesting. The prophecies are that they would come. They used the stars and the patterns to find him, but it takes time back in. Especially with that type of travel. Right. So he really was not a babe in the manger anymore. By the time the Magi got to him, he was a young child at 2 years old. More than likely. Very, very interesting. Look, we're up against another break. We'll be back here with Dr. Ken Johnson.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
A computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
Hi, Bob Tarmac for MJ'sHealthyWay.com. Are you into vitamins, nutrition, meal replacements, health shakes, keeping your body in good shape, your internal engine going? Boy, do I have a perfect place for you. MJ'sHealthyWay.com. They offer the best service and products, and they'll tell you anything you need to know about any product they have to offer. I get all my vitamins, meal replacements, shakes from MJ'sHealthyWay.com. That's spelled MJSHealthyway.com. There's so much more at the website. Go check it out. MJ'sHealthyway.com.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Hi, can you hear my voice? Imagine how many other people can hear it too. If you have advertising needs, then look no further. The Inception Radio Network currently has openings for on-air advertisements and radio show sponsorships. Given any thought to your target demographic? Inception has you covered there too. Advertising on a network gives you multiple opportunities to advertise on a wide variety of radio show broadcasts, and we have one to fit every advertising need. You know, in recent years, internet radio has exhibited a phenomenal listener growth. An Arbitron Edison survey shows that online radio boosts at least 33 million unique visitors each week and 54 million each month. And that number amazingly continues to grow. And these listeners are a part of many businesses' core demographics. And surveys have shown that internet radio listeners are far more likely than regular radio listeners to spend money on a whole range of activities. You know, internet listeners vote, they dine out and eat fast food, and they grab a cup of coffee. And here's the interesting one. They buy items online at a much higher rate than all other market segments combined. Internet radio also enables businesses to connect with consumers during work hours, where increasingly more lifestyle decisions are being made. Advertise with the best. The Inception Radio Network offers competitive advertising rates to fit just about anyone's advertising budget. Stop by today at www.inceptionradionetwork.com or call us toll-free at 1-888-919-2355. Get the word out. Get results with the Inception Radio Network.
Man vs. Archaeology with Aaron Judkins. It's about digging up the past, exposing forbidden archaeology, and discovering our hidden history. What are these mysteries of our past, and why are they important to our future? Learn more at aaronjudkins.com.
EPIC is Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council, the forum for scholars, experts, and those fascinated by and involved in the study of ancient civilizations, conspiracies, cryptozoology, ETs, and UFOs, fringe science, the paranormal, and all manner of extraordinary phenomena. Please join EPIC as we examine the mysteries of the world and beyond on epicvoyagers.com. And for updates on the upcoming interactive video presentations, the latest news and discussion on the EPIC forum, as well as research, investigations, and membership opportunities. Epic Voyages program schedule is on the Inception Radio Network. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome back here to Epic Voyages Radio. I am Maverick with our special guest, Dr. Ken Johnson, on our Christmas special, The Star of Bethlehem. One last half hour to go with Dr. Johnson. Be sure to call in with your question, 1-888-919-2355, 1-888-919-2355, and get in your question. We got one more last half hour on the Star of Bethlehem here. What a fascinating topic on our Christmas special. Dr. Johnson, we have talked about the star and the origins of, astronomy versus astrology, and how all this led up to the birth of Christ. And we had an excellent call by Bill, and we had the discussion: was Christ really born on December 25th? Maybe he was born on on September 11th, 3 BC, and not on December 25th. And we talked about how December 25th was a Roman solstice day that basically was a holiday that celebrated the sun god's soul. And I'm just trying to think that, when they combine that the Christians would be allowed to celebrate on December 25th because it was convenient for the Roman celebration. Okay, I get it. Let's talk a little bit about why do we have Christmas trees in our house when we celebrate Christmas? What's the origin of Santa Claus? I mean, come on. I've never really had a good answer for any of that. What do you think?
Well, my understanding as far as Christmas trees, they go back to the Middle Ages, when we used to have plays around the Christmas time about, and they represented, I believe, the tree of life, and they were Christmas stories. Lighting the trees and things like that could have come from various traditions. A lot of people tend to think that it's pagan. I'm sure the pagans had trees, had lights. That's one thing you got to be careful of. It is, for instance, even if you found out that the Christmas tree origin was pagan, is it pagan in the sense that it's connected with a pagan religion, or was it just a secular society that did it for some secular reason? And so all those things kind of come into play. Some people will use, there's a verse in Jeremiah, I think it's like around chapter 4 or so, that talks about you go out in the forest, you cut down a tree, you come home, you deck it with silver and gold and put it on your mantle. And people say, that's a Christmas tree, therefore it's pagan. They didn't have Christmas trees back that early. And in context, if you look clearly, what it's talking about is you go out in the forest, you chop down a tree, you take the wood, you carve an idol out of it, then you plate it with gold or silver, and then you fasten it to your mantle. So it's talking about idolatry, not necessarily Christmas trees. Since some people think that, though, I would not have a Christmas tree in a church because I don't want to offend anybody. Paul says don't do anything that might offend your brother. But it's not, pagan in origin. There's a lot of other things that are, though. Santa Claus, for instance, is a mixture of two legends. One, the legend of St. Nicholas, who did good by helping people out and creating presents and things like that. The rest of it is actually pagan. It's pretty interesting. My family is originally from Denmark. And those people, before Christianity came, worshipped Thor and Frigga and Odin and those type of things. And in the Norse religion, it's interesting because you have basically Europe where people lived. And if you traveled to the North Pole, up where it's cold, that's where the elves lives. And the elves were kind of like angels, intermediaries between the gods and men. If you went further past where the elves live, you would go into Asgard, which is where the gods live, where Odin lives, that kind of thing. And so the idea of Santa Claus being a jolly old elf that lives at the North Pole is all basically from the Norse religion. And there's a whole bunch of things. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of things connected with Santa Claus. For instance, the Scandinavians said that he was an elf or a nature spirit, and they called them pukas. And anciently, when a puka would come into your house, he would either bring something bad if you've been bad or reward you with something good. But a greeting of a puka was supposed to be ho, ho, ho. And it's kind of an interesting collection like that. On their New Year's, which would be Christmas or New Year's ours, whichever one they had, there was the legend of the Ghost Riders. It would be a time when the dead come back, the veil between the worlds are thinnest. The Celts had that on Halloween. The Scandinavians and the Sloths had it around Christmas, or the solstice, rather. But in that concept, Odin would come back with all the old warriors. You got to be careful because you could get killed during this. But Odin would be seen riding his eight-legged horse. I forget the name of the horse, but I think it's interesting how you get Odin coming around the solstice on an eight-legged horse, and you get Santa Claus, which is a jolly old elf, in a sleigh with 8 reindeer, and coming to give gifts and punish or whatever. And again, so you pull all that together, you can see all the Scandinavian Norse mythology in Christmas. But again, I think it's pretty easy to, even if you didn't know any of that stuff, it's pretty easy to pull that aside. Santa Claus is not the focus. Christmas trees are not the focus. Presents are nice, but presents aren't even the focus. The focus is Jesus Christ. And he may not have been born on the 25th, but it's a date we pick to celebrate. And a lot of people talk about that, like there's some people that are Messianic that want to go to church on Saturday, and that's perfectly fine. But if you have someone in your town that finally decides they want to go to church and maybe find out about God, everybody in America knows it's Sunday, you go to church. So it would be wise to have a Saturday service and a Sunday service, much like we talked about Polycarp and the Apostle John talking about be all things to all men. And anytime you can focus on the Lord, a holiday or whatever, do so to him. So, it's a good thing to know that Jesus was probably born in Tabernacles or September 11th, September-October timeframe. Traditionally, we set aside December 25th as his birth date, so it's good to worship him, to have a Christmas service, again, just so that you can reach people. We need to know all the truth, and as Jesus says, be as wise as serpents, but as gentle as doves.
Is there a question in the chat room regarding music in reference to celebrating Christmas? Do you know when the first reference of Christmas carols and music started? Is that pagan as well, or is that just something that was born out of the Christian faith?
I would imagine. I don't know. I haven't heard of anything making it specifically pagan. Now, there's some people that would be Protestant and not like Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox chants or traditions or whatever, and that would be one subject. But if you stop and think about it, you know that all the pagans and the Christians and the Jews, everybody sings. So again, that's one of those tricky things. If we got a carol from a pagan, is it because the pagans sing like we do? Is it something that's uniquely pagan in nature? You know, we have all the way through the Old Testament that we sing psalms to God. You know, so wherever the tune came from, you know, whatever the words now point to the Messiah. So I don't see any problem with any kind of Christmas music that specifically points to Jesus. You know, some people may object. Mm-hmm.
We do have a caller on the line. Carol, are you there?
Yes, this is Carol at Christmas. Well, we'll just move on from that, but it's something I thought you guys might cover that I'd heard rumored for a while, and that is some connection to the month of April and the birth of Jesus. And I did a quick Yahoo search, and I see April 17th, April 6th. I haven't really perused any of these more carefully, but I think that's kind of what I remembered hearing years ago.
Okay, great.
So I vaguely remember hearing something like that. I vaguely remember hearing something about that. You're welcome. I think probably where that comes from, though, is we know that Christ died on Passover. And some people may assume that Passover is also his birthday. It looks like it's probably John the Baptist's birthday, because John the Baptist was slightly older than Jesus. And the rituals tend to point to a Elijah-type person being born on that time. But when we look very carefully at Jesus' ministry, he says he was about 30 years old when he was baptized, which makes sense because you'd have to be 30 to be a priest. So he's baptized, Melchizedekian priest, that kind of thing. If you go through, as he travels through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you can see where he goes to a Hanukkah service, like in John 11, there's another Passover, there's tabernacles, there's another Passover, and then there's a certain feast, and then there's Hanukkah, and then there's a Passover. So you can calculate that it's 3.5 years. Because if he started in the fall, and then there's all these festivals in line, and then he gets killed or, crucified on Passover, you know that he had exactly a 3.5-year ministry. So if he was 33.5 dying on Passover, that would put him back to actually September again for his birth, but somewhere in that area. So my guess is that it started just as an assumption, if he maybe was born on Passover, died on Passover, but we would know that would be incorrect.
Thanks, Carol, for that call. Getting near the top of the hour, and I just have to say that, putting all this together, Ken, has really been interesting on the Star of Bethlehem, of what it meant to the Magi and the ancient prophecies and what they were looking for and why that was important. And, what an interesting thing, because now we have archaeology that supports this story as well. I think it's quite interesting that I think there's more evidence pointing to the September 11th date myself. It's kind of weird knowing that what we went through in September 11th, 2001 could have actually been the real Christmas. What a horrid tragedy that we had, on that day. But let me just kind of recap for people about the chronology of what we talked about. We have Joseph and Mary beginning their journey to Bethlehem for the census that was chosen for the close of the Jewish year in 3 BC by Cyrenius. This was, again, a huge festival that was occurring as well because of the Roman celebrations. And then near this time, in August 12th, 3 BC, we have Jupiter and Venus possibly conjuncting together as a morning star, and then Jupiter continuing its progression through the heavens. Then we see that with this progression of Jupiter representing the king planet in conjunction with Regulus, the kingship star, in the constellation of Leo, the lion, which is considered, to represent the tribe of Judah, by the way, for the Hebrews, in the constellation of Virgo, the virgin who would give birth would be a sign of the coming king that was born in a stable, possibly on September 11th, 3 BC, which happened to be the Day of Trumpets. Then we have the arrival of the king that would normally be announced with trumpets. If you have a king born, they're announcing that with trumpets. So it's interesting that September 11th, 3 BC fell on the Day of Trumpets, which is a Jewish feast day, and that really, maybe that was some kind of celestial announcement for the Messiah being born. I know that in Psalms that it says that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands, and from day to day is pouring forth speech, and night after night displaying knowledge. And I think that's exactly what those Magi were doing. And then we have 3 days later, on September 14th, that Jupiter came into union with Regulus and began that progression, that retrograde progression, which would create, at least from our viewpoint, a circling crown effect right over Bethlehem that could be seen from Bethlehem. And then 15 months later, then we have the young child when the Magi arrive, possibly celebrating that on December 25th, 2 BC when they came, when again the king planet Jupiter came to a stationary point in mid-Virgo, the Virgin, and this would have appeared to have stopped, again, right over Bethlehem as viewed from Jerusalem. So I think the stars, at least from the point of astronomy, the science of astronomy, the science of that Magi, foretold and prophesied the coming virgin birth of the Messiah. There's just a lot of interesting ties that puts all that together. And I think that's the message of the Bethlehem star, the star of Bethlehem. What kind of message do you think it gives, Dr. Johnson?
Well, I agree with you. There's just way too many ties for it to be a coincidence. Again, I think there are many ways that the Lord speaks to us. The Scriptures are the number one, the prophecies in the Scriptures. But then we have the Messianic Festivals, things like the blood moons, things like the science of the Magi with the stars and the supernovas, conjunctions in the constellations, and many other ways too. And I think it's really important that we, if possible, get a full understanding of each one of these and how they all complement each other. And the more we learn, the more we will be able to understand things better and understand what's going to take place as it takes place and even before.
How do you think in today's society Christ would be received now, with a lot of, skepticism that we have in our society? How do you think, I guess, we're talking about the first advent, the birth of Christ, and the prophecies that's yet to be fulfilled, that there's going to be a second advent, the return of Christ. How do you think the secular world with the skepticism, how are they going to react to that when that happens? Do you think they're going to believe it? Or do you think they believe even in the prophecy at all?
I think a lot of people don't. I mean, one of the prophecies themselves is that the church in general becomes more and more apostate. And we see that today. There are churches that not focus on the literalness of a Messiah and sin and salvation and hell and stuff, but just try to do good things for people. And that's a good thing to do, but they are more concerned with the cares of this world than the eternal. And so they get to the place where they don't really truly believe anymore. Some people would absolutely reject Christ, would actually fight against him, especially anybody that's going to tell me what to do, that kind of a thing. There's an awful lot of us right now, though, that would follow him completely. But of course, according to prophecy, before the terrible days come, there's a rapture. And so those things are set up. I believe in the first century, there were an awful lot of Jews that knew the prophecies that would have accepted him. But the Lord had it because he had to be crucified to pay for our sins on the cross. So he had evil people in a position of power in the government to make things happen the way they were supposed to happen. And so we're probably seeing the same thing here.
Yeah, I think you're probably right that people just won't believe. Even if they see, they don't believe. What an interesting thing. I think faith is one thing that a lot of people lack. And even myself at some points in my life, I have to admit that was true for me. But, listening to your explanation on the Star of Bethlehem and how that all ties in, I think it just gives us more reason to increase that faith. And, hopefully for this Christmas, you'll be able to find the reason and the meaning behind the holiday, what we do. Dr. Johnson, you've written some material on this in a book called The Pre-Flood Origins of Astrology. Tell us a little bit about that book and your website.
Well, my website's BibleFacts.org. I've wanted to go back and bring back the teaching of the early church fathers and the ancient rabbis, translate Dead Sea Scrolls, things like that, things pertaining to prophecy and scripture, and those type of things. And that particular book, we wanted to look at the Magi, the stories that the Magi told, the science of the Magi, how to use it prophetically, and then, of course, also how it was distorted through paganism, as most things are. And so it's kind of a good balance, I think, between them, because you see how astrology went from bad to worse, and you begin to realize with all the information that it really is a joke. I mean, the idea that a horoscope can tell me what's going to happen to me tomorrow based on my love life or my finances or whatever, based on dead people. So that's insane, really. But when you go back and you look at things like the prophecies that are very literal in the Bible, 100% accurate, and they talk about stars and Magi, and you look at the science of the Magi, and you see all the people that believed and studied it, from Isaac Newton and all these people on down, Copernicus, Kepler, they all had things like that they looked into. So there's definitely something to it. And as you said, the more we study, the more things we learn. And there may always be some piece of archaeology that's not yet proven. But I've noticed no one's ever found any archaeology that disproves anything in the Bible. And then the more we dig up, the more things we realize that prove there was a Herod, there was a Pilate, there was all these people. So pulling them all together, I think we really need to stop and focus, because we need to understand that we can be saved if we accept Jesus as Messiah. And that sounds maybe like something we don't understand or may not be correct, but then you put that around all the prophecies, all the other supernatural things that are either absolutely proven or cannot be disproven. And it's something to really think about.
Tell us the name of your book again, and how can we get it?
The one we're talking about today is the Ancient Origins of Astrology. You can get it by going to my website, BibleFacts.org. There's also a lot of free videos and other information on various subjects relating to church fathers, prophecy, Dead Sea Scrolls, things like that. You can also get them off of Amazon, which is what my site links to directly. So, and you can also drop me a line there too. Send me an email through the system. Let me know what you think about the books, or if you have any questions along those lines.
Okay, the Pre-Flood Origins of Astrology on Amazon, or go to BibleFacts.org. Dr. Johnson, thank you for coming on the program tonight. Listen, everyone, have a Merry Christmas, and I say that with all intention. Merry Christmas to you and yours. As we go into 2015, great things are going to happen. I look forward to it. Remember, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Good night from all of us here, from my producer Joe Champion, Ken Cherry from Epic, Keith Rowland from the Dark Matter Radio Network. You're listening to Epic Voyages, and until next time, the truth is out there. Merry Christmas and
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.
You say too much to learn. You say cover up the spine that your plan